All right, well, thank you everyone for your patience, and thank you for coming out on this night, the day after Memorial Day, to talk about parking in South Acton. I'm John Mangiarotti. I'm the town manager in Acton. I look forward to meeting all of you at some point, and please come say hello to me. Tonight, we're having a presentation from Jason and Bill from Nelson Nygaard, but we're technically also open as a meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the South Acton Train Advisory Committee. So we're just going to take a technical moment and call those meetings to order.
Welcome, everybody, and I'm calling the Board of Selectmen meeting to order, and we will turn the meeting over.
The meeting will be recorded on ActonTV for your viewing later, but it won't be live.
That's good, because I don't think I could stand watching myself again. I'm Michaela Moran. I'm chair of the South Acton Train Station Advisory Committee, and we are calling our meeting to order.
Thank you. So we have an exciting presentation to hear from you, from Jason, and then we have an opportunity to listen to all of you, any questions, comments, and concerns that you have. So we've already delayed enough, so let's just jump right into it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. Thank you all for being here tonight. I know the weather wasn't great, had a little technical difficulty here. Everyone's probably really excited to spend a good half hour talking about parking.
Hold
So,
the mic up.
thank you. So thank you for being here. We've got a lot to talk about. This will be about a maybe 30 or 40-minute presentation. We'll run through everything that we saw when we did our parking analysis. And then we'll talk about some of the draft strategies we came up with that we think can really help the town manage parking better. After that, there'll be a question and answer period, and then we'll also have more information available here. I'll be standing there after the presentation as well. If you want to come up, take a look at things, and talk to us personally, one-on-one, we'll be here. There's also handouts available at the front. If you didn't get one, please take one and go ahead. There's a couple questions on there we'd love to have you fill out, and then just drop it back on the table when you're done. So I will go ahead and get started. So first, a little bit about us. So my name is Jason Novsam. I'm an associate with Nelson Nygaard. We're a multimodal transportation consultancy. We do a lot of parking and demand management work here in the Boston area. With me tonight is also Bill Schwartz, principal with Nelson Nygaard as well. So we're very happy to be here. So the first thing I want to talk about is, why is this project important? Well, there's a few reasons. The biggest reason is we really want to increase access to South Acton Station. We've heard that people are very, very frustrated. We've been out there. We've seen your lots are very, very full. We get it. It's tough. It's not something that people want to keep dealing with. That's the biggest reason we're here. The next thing we want to talk about is, how can we actually streamline your parking management? And how can we plan for future parking demand as well? So we got to think about the future as much as we think about the existing conditions today. We also want to ensure that there's a fair process for that limited parking supply. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And we want to communicate that parking is not your only option. There are other ways to get to South Acton Station. We want to highlight some of those and talk about how to use those and how those might be a good option for some people as well. So moving on. Parking is a really complicated issue. It's an emotional issue, and we get that. And it sort of has this funny way of, we always want more parking, and then we build more parking, and then all of a sudden that parking is full too, and we want more, and on and on and on. So we like to joke, America's all about parking. The Pilgrims came here in search of parking, and then they moved west in search of more parking. Not sure if that's exactly what's going on in Acton, but it kind of felt fitting for tonight. So. Another thing I want to highlight here, this is a key concept, parking trade-offs. So in a perfect world, parking would be cheap and plentiful and convenient everywhere we go. We'd never have an issue. We'd love to have it that way. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. So I kind of want everyone, as we're going through this tonight, to think about, what are your priorities? Is it most important to you that parking be cheap, that it be super convenient right next to your destination, that it's plentiful, it's really easy to find a space? Try to think about which of those things is most important to you, and remember that other people may not feel the same way. They may have different priorities. In a perfect world, you'd have all three, but most likely your goal in any given facility is to have one or two of those things. So just sort of something to keep in mind as we go through this. So the agenda for tonight is I'll talk a little bit about the existing conditions that we saw, talk about the programs and management of those spaces today, and then go into those draft strategies we mentioned and how we're thinking things might look in the future if we were to implement those strategies, and then talk about how we move forward. So another key concept, obviously, whenever there's a parking crunch, we think, okay, well, it's time to build more parking. Sometimes that's a great idea. Sometimes it's not, but it's always a challenge, and it's always very, very expensive. So under current conditions, you can expect to pay around $40,000 per space in a new parking garage facility. That is not a small amount of money, and it means that over the lifetime of that garage, you need to make $275 per month per space to recoup that cost. That is extremely difficult to get that, and under the rates that you're paying today, you're likely not going to hit that target, which means you're subsidizing it from somewhere else. So here's just a little image. Think about that. That's a nice parking facility, plenty of spaces there. It looks great. Each one of those is $40,000. So another thing to just kind of think about as we talk through this. This is another key concept. How do you right price parking? So this is something we like to talk about at the beginning as well. You should always have a goal for how full your parking should be. So ideally, your parking will be about 75 to 90% full. That means that it's being really well utilized, but there's always a few spaces left, so when someone shows up, they can pretty much always get a space. When you go below that, that means you're not charging, or you're charging too much for parking perhaps, maybe lower your price, see if you can get those numbers up. And if you go above 90%, that means, okay, there's really high demand for this parking. Maybe you need to increase the price a little bit to get that utilization back down to a level where people can actually show up and find a space. So here's another way to just sort of look at that. The other key part of this is you got to think about things geographically. Okay, so that means that your core spaces, those premium spaces right next to the station or right next to whatever the site may be, those should be the most expensive. The further you're parking away from the place you want to go, you should be paying less for that. It's less convenient. It's just like any other product you buy in the store. Your premium product should be the most expensive, and then maybe there's a discount product, not quite as convenient, but it still gets the job done and you pay less for that. So that's another goal that we want to see taking place in Acton. So lastly, everyone who parks a car is a pedestrian. We're definitely here to talk about parking tonight, but if your pedestrian environment isn't working right, people are not going to park at a space that's several blocks away from their destination if they feel like it's a tough walk to get where they're going. That's another thing that you want to make sure you're making that work as well. Otherwise, people are only going to be parking right in those core areas because they don't want to walk. So let's get into the existing conditions that we saw when we went out. So first, some context. So South Acton is interesting because it has an express train service. That is part of the reason why your parking demand is so high. People actually come here from Concord and West Concord to get that express train and then get into Boston quicker. That is why you're drawing so many regional visitors, not just local residents. That's a big part of the story here. So another thing I want to draw attention to is that the perception is that everyone's driving to get to the station, and yes, very many are, but only 53% of people are actually driving alone to the station and then parking. Another 30% are being dropped off, and then another about 14% are coming by walking or biking. So a lot of people are parking, but that other 50%, they're finding other ways to get here. So that's good. That means there's flexibility. That means that people already understand that there are other ways to get here, and maybe not every single person needs to rely entirely on parking every single day. So the first thing I'm going to do here, there's a lot going on here, and you've got this map on your handouts as well. So this is all of the parking inventory that is available to commuters parking for South Acton Station, as well as a couple other additional spaces that were nearby that we thought might be relevant. So there's 511 total spaces for commuters. That's actually a pretty healthy number by MBTA commuter rail standards. Most of those spaces, about 41%, are actually resident sticker spaces. I'm sure you're all mostly familiar with that program. Another 19% of the spaces are those reserved spaces, including in that new 19 or 21 Maple Street lot that the town recently acquired. So that's the bulk of the spaces right there. Only 19% of your spaces are actually priced daily with those meters. So that's a pretty small chunk when you're actually looking at that total 511. And here's that same information just broken down by each facility. I believe that's also available up here. If you have questions about individual lots, we can certainly talk through that after the presentation as well. So parking utilization, after we went out and counted all the spaces, we went back out on another typical day, typical commuting day, once per hour from 6 a.m. Until 9 a.m. and counted all of the cars occupying those spaces in every facility to try to understand how full is it, where is it getting full first, things like that. So this image here, this is 6 a.m. That light blue color means it's less than 70% full. And this chart here, you can see the blue color is how many cars were parked, and the white color is how many open spaces. So only 10% full at 6 a.m. Not many people are showing up for that 5:30 a.m. train. Moving on to 7 a.m., totally different story. Okay, so now you're at 60% full. If you look at the main lot there, that red color, that means you're basically completely full. Those are the resident sticker spaces. Those were completely full when we went out there at 7 a.m. The green color right next to that, that's your metered spaces. Those were already, so the green color is 70 to 85% full. Also very, very full. This is at 7 a.m., okay? So we understand that's full. The School Street lot, that's also very full, that's red. But if you look at the reserved spaces here, and you look at those remote lots up in that inset, I know it's a little bit hard to see, those were not full at all yet, okay? So there's still open spaces, it's just not those great, perfect spaces right next to the station. If you move on to 8 a.m., things are really getting full. Your total system is over 80% full, and you can see all the red there. The main lot's completely full. Railroad Street lot's completely full. School Street lot is completely full. And South Acton Fire Station off to the right there, that is also almost completely full. So, however, you do still have spaces open in all of your reserved lots and your remote lots. So that's something we're going to talk a lot more about, is why are those spaces open even though your main lot is completely full. So 9 a.m., really no difference from 8 a.m. A couple more people show up, but those reserved spaces, still wide open, and the remote lots are still wide open as well. So let's talk about the utilization a little bit more here. This chart here is highlighting that your reserved and your remote lot spaces, that's the Minutevan or rail shuttle spaces, those are only 60% full. You can see that the resident sticker and meter spaces are getting full by 7 a.m. So, that's really the story that we saw here, and we want to talk about why that's happening and what we can do to more evenly distribute some of this parking demand. So let's talk about how things are being managed now. So this is a summary here of how all of your different types of commuter parking are being managed and what you're paying for them. So I'm going to walk through line by line, and stop me if there's any questions. There's kind of a lot going on, but we want to make sure people really understand all of these pieces. So let's start with the resident sticker. So that's $100 per year, or $50 for seniors. There's no daily option related to that. If you get the annual sticker, you've got it for the year. You can park in those spaces. No daily situation at all. So far this year, there's been 356 permits sold. So that is many more than the actual number of resident sticker spaces that are available. Now, of course, not all those people are coming and parking every day, right? Many of them may only be using it once in a while, but it's important to acknowledge that. If you go down to the reserve spaces, I'm sure many people are familiar with this as well. These are completely sold out. It's a situation where you buy for $100 per month, you basically own that space. That's your space. No one else can park there, even when you're not there. It's completely sold out. There's a big waiting list, and there's a lot more demand to get access to these spaces. The metered spaces, these are $5 per day. That's similar to a lot of towns in the MBTA system. However, Littleton, right next door, they're actually charging $6 per day, and there are other towns with a similar express train service that are charging more than $5. So that's another thing to sort of think about there. The remote lots. So these are those lots that you can access by shuttle. That's the Acton Rail Shuttle. Currently, they're charging $3 a day to park and ride there, or you can get an annual pass for $250 a year. So this is another one we want to talk about a lot. So obviously $3 a day is cheaper than $5 a day. So if you're parking at the meters usually, this is definitely a cheaper option for you. However, if you have the resident sticker you really have no financial incentive whatsoever to use these. So yeah, they're open. Maybe now that people know they're open, they'll go park there. But financially, you're not really gaining anything through that. So that's something we need to figure out. Why is it priced that way, and what can we do better? And then finally, to give some insight into the bike lockers, those are going for $100 per year right now. Those are actually completely sold out as well. So there's a lot of demand for bike parking. There's an opportunity to add bike parking, which is much less expensive, obviously, than building a parking garage. So let's talk specifically about the reserved space program now. It's going to be managed via a lottery system because it is sold out and there's a waiting list. Like I said, it covers about 19% of all the spaces in the system. That's a pretty good portion of your spaces that are really locked up in that specific reserved type of mode. Right now, 26% of those spaces are filled by residents, and the other 74% are filled by non-residents. So it is definitely a majority of non-residents using these, not primarily residents. As I said, it's one space per permit holder. So that means you're getting these underutilized facilities. People don't use the spaces every day. That's normal. That's fine. But that means that they're only 60% full. When you've got this much parking demand, you can't really afford to have, 40% of these spaces being empty. So we need to think about how we can fix that. In terms of the rate, this is interesting. If you actually calculate this out based on the number of work days in the year, you're paying about $5, or actually a little bit less than $5 per day to have access to this space. That's the same or slightly lower than the rate you'd pay for the meters. So right now, if you're someone that takes the train every day, why would you not want this? Of course you would. It's a premium product, but you're paying the same price that you would for the regular parking space. So that's another thing we need to think about. How can we maybe adjust some of this pricing to make a little bit more sense? Right now, there's not a specific resident preference in the rate or the lottery system. So moving forward, we need to sort of think about what our goals are. Yes, this is a regional facility. It's not only for residents. However, maybe we need to think about, does that 26% to 74% balance make sense? That's an open question. So moving on, let's talk about the resident sticker program. As I said, 356 stickers have been sold so far this year, and that number is going to continue to go up because we're not quite done with the fiscal year yet. There's only 224 resident sticker spaces. That means you're oversold by 60%. Now, of course, not everybody is coming to take the train every day. Some people may only be using it once in a while. Some people may have bought several stickers because they have multiple vehicles. I don't have the exact details on what that looks like, but I can tell you that you're oversold by a lot. And the fact that those spaces are full by 7 a.m. means that there's a huge demand for that. So what can we do to sort of unlock a little bit more for people that want to make use of some type of a resident program? So if you look at your total parking supply, 544 total spaces. So that's actually significantly more than the number of stickers that have been sold. So the total number of spaces in your system is more than that demand. However, right now, the way things are being managed, it's sort of making it difficult for things to naturally balance. And we'll talk more about that in the strategy section as well. So again, I want to show this image because most of the rest of the presentation is focused on this concept. How can you right price parking? Your premium spaces need to be the most expensive, and your less convenient spaces need to be the least expensive, right? So right now, you're completely full in your main lots. That means you might want to raise your price in those lots. Your lots that are only 60% full, your remote lots, maybe you're charging too much. So we need to think about this concept kind of as we go through the rest of these strategies. So the first thing I'm going to do related to pricing is talk about peer towns. These are all other towns in the MBTA system. This table is also available over here. If it's a little bit hard to see, please find me over here. I'd love to talk more about this. I'm going to highlight a few things here. So you're paying $100 per year for that resident commuter permit. Compared to all these other towns, that is significantly less expensive. If you look at West Concord, they're paying $150 for 6 months. If you look at Sharon, they're paying $135 for 3 months. If you look at some of these other monthly passes, Littleton, $105 per month, Belmont, $90 per month. You can really see the pattern here. So of course, it's great to have this inexpensive access to parking. That's an awesome thing, but if it's meaning that your demand is not really shaking out right, we need to think about what we can do differently. So it's just something to keep in mind. In terms of your daily fee, we talked about this a little bit as well. You're charging $5 a day. That's similar to a lot of MBTA facilities, but you've got that express train. That's a premium service. So what can we do to acknowledge that that's a premium service in the way we're pricing it? Littleton is already charging $6 a day. I think that there's a reasonable argument to be made for charging more than $5 here. So one other thing I want to highlight here, this is a unique program that we're seeing in Mansfield. Okay, so Mansfield right now, they're only paying $20 per year for a resident pass, but what they're doing is they're charging things daily. So if you have the resident pass, you only pay $3 a day. It's a very cheap annual pass, but you're paying $3 a day. Non-residents are paying $4 a day, so they're paying more than the residents. But everything is happening daily, which is good because people don't take the train every day. You shouldn't be paying for something on an annual basis that you're not using every day. It's going to allow the demand to sort of sort itself out in a little bit more of a natural way. The last thing I want to talk about is, this reserved space program you have where it's one permit, one space. Only Belmont has a similar program like that, and they only have 10 spaces under that, and they don't really have, a significant parking facility other than that. So it's kind of a unique thing that you guys have. Obviously, there's a lot of demand for it, but it also has some issues. If it's only being, used 60% full on a typical day, that's a problem because you want it to be a lot closer to 85, 90% full. So next I want to talk about some of the shuttle programs that are available. I don't know exactly how many of you may or may not be familiar with this, but there are 2 remote parking facilities at Mount Calvary Church and West Acton Fire Station. The Minutevan or Acton Rail Shuttle, this provides a shuttle service from those lots to the station once per train in the morning. So it runs for each train. You pay the bus driver for both your parking pass and to get on the shuttle. You take the shuttle in and you're ready to go. Same thing in the afternoon. We want to draw attention to that because those spaces are only 60% full, and they might be a great option for people who are trying to take a later train. You know what train you want to take. You show up, to the shuttle lot, take the shuttle in, no worries, no problem. Here's some more details on that. So the rail shuttle is $3 per day to park there and take the shuttle, or you can get a $250 per year annual pass. There's also a couple other services, the Cross Acton Transit that runs once per hour, but it's got no parking associated with it. And then the Maynard Acton Shuttle, which is running from Maynard to South Acton Station. So just some other things to be aware of. So we looked at ridership data for these. It looks like the ridership is going up, which is good because that means more and more people are taking advantage of these. They're not forcing themselves to hunt for parking every day in the main lot. That's a good trend. We want to continue that trend. In terms of bicycle facilities, biking is another great option to get to the station. So you do have the rail trail running from Maynard north to the station. If you live anywhere along that, it's totally protected. It's a beautiful natural trail. That's a great option to get to the station as well. You also have the Zagster bike share. Maybe not as big of an option for commuters. However, it's something to be aware of. Very inexpensive way to get access to a bike. Maybe you try it out, try the rail trail, and you like it, and you decide I'm going to start biking to the station. So something to be aware of. In terms of your bike parking, this is a picture we took on the first day we came out here. Pretty rainy. However, the bike parking was almost completely full. That's something to be aware of. A lot of people are biking here. That's a great thing. Maybe we need to add even more bike parking. You don't want to deter anyone from taking a bike instead of their car because they're worried about finding somewhere to lock their bike. So that's an important thing to keep an eye on. In terms of your parking enforcement, so it's enforced every day. They sweep all the lots. Right now, your metered spaces are tied to pay by space. So if you've used the app or the kiosk before, you have to put your space number in. It's not linked to your registration at all. It's not linked to your resident status at all. So let's talk about strategies. So I know that was a lot of different information here. What can we actually do to get things running maybe a little bit more smoothly? So again, here's your existing pricing structure. I'm gonna go line by line and talk about what we would suggest may be a better way to manage each one of these types of parking. So starting with the resident sticker program, similar to that Mansfield program we were talking about, An option for you might be make that resident sticker either completely free or very inexpensive on an annual level, but move to a daily parking rate. Now, I don't know exactly what that daily parking rate should be. That's something that the town is going to have to think about. But moving to a daily rate opens up a lot more flexibility. What would happen then is all of the metered spaces and all of the resident sticker spaces, those are now combined. Those are all open to anyone as long as you're paying a daily rate. The reserved spaces, we would suggest that maybe that monthly rate should go up, since right now it's kind of coming out to $5 a day. I mean, it's a premium product, right? It should probably cost more than the regular meters. The other thing we would suggest is that you don't need assigned spaces. You have an opportunity to oversell those permits. That'll get more people off the waiting list, which will make people happy, and it'll get those spaces more highly utilized. The way we would propose doing that would be maybe sell 5% more permits in a month, and then go out, count the cars, make sure that things aren't getting too full, sell 5% more, and keep doing that until you get up to an average of about 85% full. That way people will always be able to find a space, but you'll now have sold more permits than you would ever have been able to with assigned spaces. So in terms of the metered spaces, we talked about that a little bit in terms of how the resident stickers would work, but everything's now a daily rate. The key thing here is that there's a cheaper rate for residents who have that sticker versus the non-residents who are paying a higher rate, most likely even higher than what it is now. And finally, in terms of the remote lots, these lots have to be cheaper than your resident sticker program. Otherwise, there's just no financial incentive to use them. And this is a great option. They're reliable. There's always parking there right now. The shuttle runs once per train. It's a great option. We just need to price them right to make sure people make that their first option. Finally, looking a little bit longer term, there may not even be a need for a specific reserved program. That is kind of a unique situation that you have here. And really the big lesson is the closer lots have to be the most expensive, and the further away you go, make those cheaper, and that way people will be incentivized to park further away. They won't be coming to the main lot, hunting around and realizing it's full, going somewhere else, all that. You want people to naturally start parking a little bit further away because they actually have an incentive to do so. So that's the long-term goal, is something managed similar to that. So finally, what are the benefits of the system? Well, residents always would get a preferential rate no matter where they park. You wouldn't have a double payment situation where you're already paying a significant annual or monthly fee and then you end up paying a meter on top of that. You're just paying daily based on whether you're a resident or non-resident. You're going to have better utilization of all your spaces. That's really important because remember, it's $40,000 per space to build more spaces. You got to use everything that you have as much as possible. And then finally, what do we need to make this happen? Right now, you're operating on a pay-by-space basis. You would need to actually move to pay-by-plate. So that way, the Passport app, if any of you have used that, you'd put your license plate in there. It'll know if you're a resident or if you're a non-resident, and it'll charge you the correct rate. It's not complicated. You'll only be charged on the days where you're actually using it. So pretty straightforward. You already have the technology to do that. Beyond that, you could look into license plate reader technology that would simplify enforcement, make things a little bit smoother, and you can add your Passport app to all of your lots. It doesn't need to just be in your main lot. That's something that can operate at the remote lots. There's no reason that you need to, necessarily pay the bus driver for your parking pass. It's too complicated. Let everyone use the Passport app. And then keep monitoring your utilization. Set a goal, maybe 85%, 90%. Monitor that utilization every 6 months and adjust your pricing accordingly.Maybe you keep the resident rate flat, but if you're still hitting 100% full in your main lot, increase that non-resident rate by a little bit and keep doing that until you start to see that utilization dip a little bit to the point where there's always going to be a couple spaces available, because that's what people actually need. They need to know that they can find a space when they come to the station. Finally, what are some other strategies? Well, right now your rail shuttle is working great. We want to promote that as much as possible. If that was to start to get full, those lots, there are a few other lots in town that we've identified that could be options to expand, those remote lot options. So that's something looking longer term. If you did need to expand that program, you do have options. Finally, continue to improve the active transportation environment. A lot of people are biking to the station. The bike parking is completely full. More and more people want to bike. Let's make that even easier. Let's stop people from parking at all. Let them bike. It's a great option. So continue to promote bike lanes, bike parking as much as you can. And finally, let's talk a little bit about, okay, let's say a little bit longer term, what would it really take maybe to expand parking, add to that supply? Well, you're still looking at that $40,000 per space. That's why you gotta use price to control demand first. To give you some other idea of the potential impacts, traffic impacts. If you double the number of spaces in that main lot, that's double the number of cars parking in there. That means you might need additional traffic signals. You're gonna have additional congestion on the streets. That's not great. Also the impact to the historic character of the neighborhood. This is gonna be a big, clunky garage. It's not necessarily the perfect thing you wanna have sitting right in your neighborhood. Something to think about. And finally, so to give you some examples of places nearby that have built garages, Air Station, they're building a terrace right now for $5.2 million. They're gonna have 180 spaces. That's about $29,000 per space. That's on the low end. Wonderland Station in Revere, that was built in 2013. $53 million for about 1,400 spaces. That's $36,000 per space. Way up on the high end, Beverly recently built a garage in 2014. Beverly is one of the busiest MBTA commuter rail stations in the entire system. $34 million for 500 spaces. That's over $60,000 per space. Now that's maybe not what you would expect here, but this is just to give you some idea of these are the numbers that people are putting up to add to their parking supply. It's a challenge. So that's all we have. Thank you so much. We'd love to hear your questions. As I said, we've got more details on the materials over here as well. Feel free to browse those and come up to us, talk to us, and thank you so much for being here.
If you don't mind coming to the microphone to ask the question so we can record it.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm Franny Osman from West Acton. And I wanted to thank you. You were the company that helped us apply for our first application to the Clean Air and Mobility Program that created our rail shuttle and our other shuttle years ago. I just had a few questions, and maybe I'll just ask them and let you answer them all together. Well, I had a comment that the other problem that you didn't mention, one problem I've noticed is that people get there really early to the train station and idle in the winter. When I walked through the lot, there were all these people before the 7:03 train idling for a long time because they wanted to make sure they got spots. I think your ideas are great. I've been on the Transportation Advisory Committee for many, many years, and we've been saying this for many years, so I'm really happy to see you thinking about pricing per space. I think that makes sense, and the pricing accordingly to the distance. I want to note that not each train is met because right now, because we're trying to go to the other side, there is a missing train in the morning and the evening, and that is a problem. And that relates to my other suggestion. You didn't talk about shuttling more people. Instead of people bringing their tin box to the station, we should be having frequent shuttles. And I think that's one of the reasons that people don't always use the rail shuttle, because it adds time in the morning. You have to get there in time to make sure you don't miss it, so that adds a lot to what are very long commutes. So I would advise us to look, in addition to these great suggestions, into more shuttling from other parts of town, in addition from other towns. And one of the reasons people might not be using their reserved spots or using that program is the sidewalks. It's scary walking on those streets. I think that's it, but I did have a question. Did you look into what percentage of the meters are used by residents versus non-residents, and what towns they're coming from?
Sure, that's an excellent question. I think if there was anything that I could know that would help us answer some of these questions, it would be that. Unfortunately, we don't have that information. That's, unfortunately outside of the scope of this study, but I think as a follow-up item, that's absolutely something we'd love to know. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the handouts are asking a question about, do you have a resident sticker? And if so, do you ever end up paying at the meter anyway? We'd love to at least get a general idea of how often that's happening.
Yes, that would be great, because we do want to solve these problems. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Vikram Parikh. I live in Boxborough, and I take the train in, obviously, from South Acton. I have a few things here. One, I was quite fortunate. I got a space parking with Gordon Richards, which is now turning to 199 Maple, right, that new parking lot. I guess that's obviously going to be, I guess for the short term anyway, a lottery system. Just a few comments. One is, you didn't mention anything about seasonal things, right? It's wonderful to bicycle to the train,
Yeah.
but it's not so wonderful when there's a blizzard, for example. I don't know how that affects shuttle service. Anyway, there's that. So my situation, I have two young kids. Now I have a 8-week-old and a 2.5-year-old, and they have to get to daycare, and I have to drop into daycare, and I have to catch my train. So I'm concerned about this. Like a lot of my taxes, actually, Boxborough, we pay a lot of taxes to Acton for school districts and a number of things. So a lot of my high taxes are going to Acton, but I don't reap any of the benefits of this, so I'm not entitled to get a sticker. I mean, I understand that people from Concord come in. They have 2 train stations in Concord. We don't have any. So I think, if there any way that Boxborough could sort of like fall into that sort of Acton-Boxborough thing, I think that'd be a pretty neighborly thing to do. What? Yes, right, exactly, in other towns as well, certainly. And then I guess that gets back to like the regional versus resident thing, right? I mean, it is a regional train station, and then Acton is going to reap all the benefits of all the, of all the people paying for all the parking. It's not really fair if I come from a town that doesn't have a train station, I'm paying your taxes, that I'm going to get, the short end of the stick. Let's see. And regarding $40,000 per space, where do those numbers come from? Because that seems actually kind of high. If you put like a second level, I understand like about traffic situations and so on and so forth, but there's also like going forward expansion. There's a lot of building going on, especially in Boxborough. We're seeing new houses come up all the time. There's a big fight with the Toll Brothers. They're going to put up all these properties. So, bottom line is there's going to be a lot more traffic coming to use the train. So it's one thing to optimize the spaces that are there, but I think long-term there really has to be more spaces, bottom line, and convenient. You can't, go and then you park and then you go and you pay and you go back to your car, you put the sticker in, then you go and you catch your train, all in like the 7 minutes you have between dropping off your kids and the train actually departing. Shuttles also, I think you have to get there quite early in order to make the shuttle, so that goes to that lady's point about them running more frequently. See, last thing is, yes. I don't know. So have there been any studies done about that kind of stuff? I mean, about, in fact, increasing the parking
Sure.
and those costs?
Yeah.
And
So,
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all great points. We're definitely aware that this is a regional facility. We understand a lot of people are coming here. This is an important service to them, that they're able to use this station, that they're able to park here. We want that to be able to continue to happen. I mean, that's an important part of this problem. You mentioned some of the possible solutions. The shuttle, we want that shuttle to be more frequent, if at all possible. We want, if there was a way to add to the parking supply, whether it's through new shared parking remote lots or building a new facility, of course, that would be fantastic. That 40,000 per space number, that's coming from looking at examples in the region that have built garages in the last 10 years. So I think, Air is the most similar, most recent one. That facility, they really just built a top level above an existing parking lot. So there were already, I think, maybe 100 spaces. I'm just, you can look this up. I think there were about 100 spaces there, and they're adding maybe 80 spaces onto a top terrace. They paid over $5 million for that to get those additional 80 spaces. So the total facility is now 180 spaces, but they're only gaining, 80 spaces. So it's expensive. It's not impossible. I can tell you the way they funded it. They had the longest standing federal transportation earmark in the country, at least this is something that I've heard. So this was something from 1988 that they had, I think it was $3 or $4 million, something like that. You know, there was a long process to finally get this thing through. Finally, now it's happening. That type of federal money is really hard to come by. So I don't want to say it's impossible. They managed to do it, but that's coming from 1988. So, yep.
Just as a follow-up, as a layperson, I understood, that generally as a town or a city, like, you have resources available, like you have your own snow plows and you have some, couldn't there be something you put together your own building people to sort of build a garage for a lower cost than what, an external contractor? I realize this is America and we're supposed to pay through the nose for everything,
Yeah.
Screw socialism, right? But never mind.
I will say that sounds unlikely, but I've not heard of a similar situation. If there is one out there, I'd be really interested to hear about it.
Just Tara Fredericks, West Acton, word in for unions and living wage, as opposed to paying through the nose. It's a different way of looking at things that we can all actually make a living. But on a regional context, I feel like, yes, it's great. Everybody should do their share for the regional impact. And we've done our share. We have 3,000 units of housing, very affordable market rate housing on Route 2A. We house the Acton train station. We take care of the roads getting to and from the train station. And I would love to see some lots in your towns, like maybe even shuttle coming to and from the schools. So when people are letting off the schools, then you can take the shuttle from there and we can have parking at the schools. I don't know, but I feel like the solution is more about everybody else contributing instead of stuffing more on Acton. Thank you.
Well, your train station is here, right?
Hi, Ed DeLuca, I'm from Stowe, Mass. Just to follow up on that, right tonight, Kate Hogan is talking with the Stowe Selectmen about regional transportation things specifically related to the train station. And one of the things I think would be enhancing is if there were access for shuttles on the south side. And it's because they're south side towns, access to the north side just adds minutes and tens of minutes to the commute. And shuttle service to the south side would facilitate those, use of those vehicles, reducing the parking pressure. And so if you can envision doing that as you develop the new infrastructure on the south side, how that might work, that could really be helpful.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Ben Patterson, active person. I'm one of the people that pays $100, and that's totally just because I know I can get there and get a space. I'm in a similar situation where I need to drop my kids off. So hearing, I only see it as a premier space insofar as I know there will be one. So from my end, changing around the sort of paradigm to allow for people that are dropping off their kids and so on to know they'll get a space all sounds great to me. I think kind of echoing previous comments, I'd also wonder what kinds of options there are for other sides of town. I live in Acton Center, and I know North Acton also doesn't really have a shuttle affiliated with the rail, and that's maybe sort of a transportation committee thing, but that's probably been talked about to no end. But in terms of this study, that might be something worth considering. The third thing was probably a question that's hard to answer, but as you're adjusting pricing and so on, I know you were sort of suggesting maybe setting something up and seeing how it goes. I wonder how you can model the reaction of the demand on the parking when prices are being changed so drastically. My concern would be that there's suddenly a rush, and then again we're in this situation again where there's no parking, right? So, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to spend a little time talking about that. I think it's tricky. It's tricky to figure out, like you said, you don't want to jump into something and all of a sudden your pricing schemes everywhere are completely different. How's your demand changing? You want to go step by step. You want to be incremental to figure out how things are being impacted. I think it's going to take some additional work beyond this study to figure out if you go to a daily rate, what exactly does that rate need to be? I'm not here today to tell you that I know what that rate should be, because I don't. That's something that needs more thought. But I can tell you that other towns have found success with that daily rate maybe they're charging a little bit less for residents than non-residents, but it's opening up more flexibility for everyone because now all the spaces are available to everybody. It's, it's more flexible. So, but the best thing you can do is go out there and whenever you make a change, do utilization counts, go to the lots, count how full things are at different times of day and figure out, has there been a change? And just keep doing that. Do it every 3 months, every 6 months, whatever you need to make sure you're understanding how those patterns are changing.
Hi, Sean Jennings, West Acton. During your presentation, I had a few things that I felt you hit on some good points, and I felt like you might have swung and missed on a few. To the good things, I agree that the shuttle service and the parking was different than the resident parking and things like that, and that all needs to be lumped into one unit, that anyone can use those, because it didn't make sense to have a resident sticker and then also buy a yearly thing at that. So I think that's good. As far as, trying to squeeze out a couple extra spots or a couple extra passes at the reserve parking, I think, you said it was 19% and 60% utilized, and you want to get up to 85%. So you're talking about a very small increase, and that kind of defeats the purpose of the reserve spots for the people that want to have or need to have a spot in the morning. And the way you would fix that is if you had plenty of spots right out front, in an ideal situation. Now, obviously that's not the case, and I think one thing you guys aren't thinking about is that, you say that a parking garage will increase the number of cars, but there's a tremendous number of cars of people getting dropped off, and those are all cars that would park if there was a parking spot for them. So that's not going to increase the number of cars if you have a lot, and if you have a lot with infinite number, or just a large number of spots, then you won't need reserve parking, and that has double effect of the more you can open up, the better it is, and try not to take too long. And I also felt you guys are very way off in not trying to address the parking. You're trying to address the value and the want. So you're trying to make it cost prohibitive to address the parking and not actually add spots. Right, and I think you guys are way off base on that point. It's
I'd love to just quickly respond to that. I think, it's a totally valid point that it would be great to have more parking here. I mean, that's absolutely true. The parking is very full, even including the reserved spaces. As you said, it's full. Yeah, those are only 60% full, at least from what we saw. But yeah, it's very full. So this is not, we're not trying to be here to say you absolutely should not ever construct more parking. That's not the point. But the point is that it's very, very expensive to construct more parking. And because we saw some opportunities, we saw, hey, the shuttle spaces are only 60% full, reserve spaces are only 60% full. We need to at least try much lower cost options to get those things to fill up first. Think about how we can expand the shuttle system, how we can change the reserve program just a little bit. We still want to make sure people always have a space there. The goal with the reserve program would not be that it's no longer guaranteeing you a space. It's that you can oversell it just enough so that it's not 60% full only. And you got to be slow about that, because if you sell too many, then all of a sudden it's 100% full and someone's upset that they paid for this and they couldn't find a space. We definitely would not want that. But we do think that it's a good idea to try pushing these low-cost options first before you start to think about a really expensive capital investment.
I'm Jeff Kurz, West Acton. I think I mostly agree with that. I think, adding a parking garage, I mean, if you want parking to get really expensive, add a parking garage. And what I'm actually wondering related to that is, does the money that we're paying now, does that actually cover the costs of maintaining the lot as it is? and the minute van, because all that kind of has to balance out. So if we do some of the low-cost options even, like adding a minute van, adding additional shuttle service, that's another driver, another van, that has to be paid for too. So do these fees we pay cover that, or does the town have to foot in some of that, or how does that work out?
Sure. So I can talk a little bit more about that. We have not, at this point, we can't tell you exactly financial details about if everything is 100% covered under the existing system. That's something we're still looking at. In terms of, would the cost of a new garage be covered by that garage? Based on $40,000 a space, I think it comes out to $265 per month over the lifetime of the garage per space. I think assuming that space is full every day, that's about $11, $12 a day, something like that. That's much higher than what you're charging now, $12 a day. So it would likely have to be subsidized through something else.
They can pay for it.
Can I answer that question? There's a parking enterprise budget that pays for the maintenance of all and upkeep of all the lots, and it also pays for a portion of the shuttle services that serve the station. But it does not pay, or it has not in the past paid for the acquisition of any of the property that's used for parking. So it pays for repaving the lots, lighting the lots, plowing the lots, reconfiguring the lots, painting the lots, all that kind of stuff. It pays for the police to enforce the traffic rules in the lots, and again, like I said, a portion of the van services. So no tax money is used for that currently.
Actually, before there's another question, I just wanted to, some of you may have attended the town meeting in April where Acton town meeting voters approved an article that has the town spending $1.1 million to acquire the parking lot, or the property that currently contains some parking at Maple Street. So in terms of investing in new parking, it's something that the town of Acton is doing. The selectmen made that as a goal, and the acquisition is still in process, but we hope it'll be finalized this year. Just to give you a sense, that's going to add approximately $80,000 in expenses to the town every year, just for that, just to buy the land, so that we can actually use it to provide additional capacity for the town and others in the region to find places to park. So we certainly are doing a lot to try to make investments, but a program like this will help us understand sort of long-term how to strategically do any further investments.
Hi, I'm Renee Robbins, West Acton. I get to the train station in a wide variety of ways. I bike in season when it's not rainy. I'm fortunate to have a husband who mostly works at home, so I can get a ride and dropped off on days like today. Sometimes I take the shuttle, which I can walk to, so I don't have to park there. I'm around the corner from the fire station. And if I do need to drive, I'm likely to park in West Concord because it's just simply easier, and I don't buy resident sticker, and even if I did, I wouldn't get there early enough to get a spot, so I can't remember the last time I parked in Acton. I did used to park there at Jones Field. Maybe it was 10 years ago or more, before Jones Field became dedicated user-owned spots. And I can't tell you how exasperating I find it to go by there on a random day that I might be home and find unused spots when you know that there are people who would have liked to drive and parked at the train station, maybe who needed to drive and park at the train station to get to work, and were forced onto Route 2 and made that traffic all that much worse, and then to not even find a spot at Alewife. And to have empty spaces sitting there is just mind-boggling to me. This is a resource that's everybody wants access to. It's like basic food, okay? Everybody needs to eat. But you've got these dedicated parking spaces that are like caviar, and you're saving them for the people who could afford to eat caviar when they're people who can't eat regular food. And that's, to me, not the way you manage a public resource. You manage a public resource so that it's available for everybody. And it's scarce, yes, so not everybody is going to have the same access, but I'm much more supportive of your notion of making the premium pricing related to proximity to the train station rather than letting somebody own a spot and not use it. There are people in this town who can afford to pay that amount to have a spot for them when they want it. They don't even have a monthly pass because they don't use the train that often, but when they use it, they want the spot there. Maybe they're going into some big-name law firm downtown. And I just really object to having those dedicated spaces go unused. That's maybe my biggest gripe. About the bike parking, yes, we need more parking. I have arrived at the train. I tend to take later trains, and sometimes I've gotten there, and I mean, I'm on my bike, I'm doing the right thing, but I can't find a place to lock it. And to the point where I'm running around looking for some street sign to lock my bike to so that I can actually get on the train that's pulling into the station. And I've had a couple of days like that, and it's not fun. I would also argue for more covered parking. I don't need a dedicated locker, but I would appreciate something over my bike so that if it's not going to rain during the morning or evening commute, but during the day, which is a very typical summer weather pattern, I don't have a wet bike when I get home at 6:22. And the tiny bit of covered parking that's there is really inadequate to actually keep the bicycles dry and out of the rain. So more bike parking and decently covered. The remote lots, you mentioned a little bit about how awkward it is to have to pay the driver. It's more than awkward. Like, here you are sitting on the shuttle, you get on the shuttle, and now there's somebody who gets on the shuttle, has to pay the driver for his parking pass, then run back to his car, sometimes in the winter, like over snow mounds, and put that on his dashboard, and you're sitting there waiting for him, but then there's another person who's got to do the same thing because they have to do it one at a time because they got to pay the driver and get the card to put on their dashboard. It's a ridiculous system, and that's got to be rethought. People need to be able to pay for that parking when they get there and before they actually get on the shuttle. The timing of the shuttle is not great. They build in so much extra time that I could practically leave my house and walk from West Acton in the amount of time it takes me to walk around the corner, get on the shuttle, and get to the train station with something like a 12 or 14-minute buffer. You need buffer, but it's just a little excessive. And a couple of shuttle drivers ago, he would regularly leave maybe 4 or 5 minutes after the scheduled time. So if I knew that I could get there 4 or 5 minutes later, and everybody who's a train commuter knows that 4 or 5 minutes is a really long amount of time in the morning, but you didn't know because every now and then maybe he was sick and somebody else would there and leave on time, and then you've missed the shuttle. So that schedule should be looked at. And the fact that you can't take the 8:02 train using the shuttle is also a problem. Okay, not specifically related to parking, but indirectly related to access to the train station, I urge the town to look at the intersection of Central Street and Main Street. And you haven't mentioned that today, nobody else has commented on it, but it is a big problem with access to the train station and also for people who are trying to get to the railroad, not the railroad, the School Street overflow lot, because if you're coming to the main lot, but you don't get a space there and you got to go to School Street or the fire station, you have to get through that intersection, and sometimes it could take 2, 3, 4 cycles of the light to get through there. So I don't know whether it's light timing, I don't know, or better marking of turning lanes or something, but that intersection is a problem that's backing up access to the train station, and it backs up well past Central Street on a random basis, so you can't even know how much time you need to build in because suddenly there's a day when it takes 4 minutes. And then I think lastly, in response to your comment about wanting to be at like 85 or 90% utilization, I just hope that you realize that all of the people who are no longer utilizing those spots because they can't afford it are now not able to take the train unless you have provided affordable parking elsewhere. And so don't make sure in any new pricing scenario you come up with that there is an option less convenient maybe, but an option that remains affordable for people who do need to commute into town for their jobs. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Hi, Amanda Steinberg. I live in Northeast Acton, I guess you'd call it. I don't know if that's the actual name of it. But I am one of these people who has a reserved space, and none of the other options work for me. My daughter's daycare opens at 7:30 a.m. So I can't get there before then. I rush over to the train station after I drop my daughter off at 7:30 a.m. If I did not have a reserved spot, I would miss the train every day. And I'm a little unclear because sometimes the reserved parking is totally full. I know this because I've been doing it for a year. I don't know, did you just do one day?
So we did just do one day. Now,
Okay.
obviously, you know, if we were to consider overselling those permits, you have to do it really slowly, and you have to go out there and count a lot to make sure that, you know, yeah, we counted one day. I'm not going to
Yeah.
claim to you based on one day that that's what it looks like every day. I don't know that.
And was it, did you count the 21 Maple Street lot, and when was it?
We did. We counted that. We counted all the facilities at 6, 7, 8, and 9 a.m. It was on a Thursday. I don't
This
have
past Thursday?
Not this past. It was maybe a couple weeks back. So
A couple weeks back.
that we'll have that data available.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I park in that lot right now, but it has severely decreased since the town purchased it, or was announced in its intention to purchase it, because people are very insecure about, Mr. Richards sent a letter that I think made people unclear about what was exactly happening. So people are finding other options, so it's a lot emptier than it used to be. And I guess, can I ask questions of the selectmen too? Yeah. So as someone who parks in that lot, we were told that the town would own it as of July 1st. And I know the lottery isn't supposed to take effect until September. So my question about that lot is what's going to happen in the interim between July and September? Will those of us who are parking there still be able to park there, or do I need to find something else to do?
Thank you, that's a good question. I've been working with Mr. Richards to try to get a hold of everybody. We now have a list of everybody's email address, which we're going to be planning to communicate with all of you in the next week or so, to try to give you a little bit of notice. I mean, I hope you understand we're trying to finalize the actual real estate before we make permanent plans on how the parking will go, but we understand that you need to figure out where you're parking. So we'll be in touch shortly.
Okay, all right. And then the other thing, a couple things I want to point out is whoever mentioned if you do expand the shuttle program to go further afield, I think is a good idea. Living north of Route 2, as I do, anywhere I go to take the shuttle, I'm basically at the train station anyway. It doesn't make sense to me, and I have to get there so early. I'd have to drop my daughter off, then get to the shuttle. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So if you had something up further north, that might work for more people. And also I want to point out, I'm a big supporter of a parking deck. I think we do need to expand the parking, and in terms of traffic issues, it is true that a lot of people are getting dropped off right now, and that's not only one trip, that's 2 trips. So that's a lot of traffic that would just be parking there and not going back and forth every morning. So that's it.
Thank you.
Sorry. Hi, my name's Mark Jason. Apologies. Nice presentation. A lot of nice statistics you put through. Looks like a lot of thought has gone into this, and really appreciate it from a person that lives in Acton for 2 years. So I'm one of the residents that does also purchase a spot at Gordon Richards' property, and I think you just addressed the question, or the lady's question about what would happen to that space. So I came out 2 years ago from Boston through to Acton to put my kids into the daycare system and also into the school system, and we pay a very high taxes here, as we all know. And so I need that permanent premium space just because of the work and travel commitments. And I guess my point is that first, what will happen will all those people that Gordon Richards go into a lottery system, or will they, after September, after August, retain that parking? Or is that still being finalized?
Yes, that is what's being finalized. Once we will be communicating, hopefully we have your contact information. If not, you can make sure I get it before you go.
Sure.
We'll be communicating that to all of you in the next few weeks.
Okay. And one point is that coming out here, it was more for, the better school system and so forth. And I just think getting young families here, people like myself and others that want to come into this community, really engage in the community, be plugged in, unless this parking situation is really fixed, you will see more people my age not want to come to this community and have their kids in the schools because the parking is impossible. As lady mentioned, 7:30 is impossible for me to get my kid in daycare and catch the train because it doesn't open. So I know you guys are making some great progress and some great strides in terms of trying to fix it, but I think from an owning perspective, if I known this 2 years ago when I bought a house that the parking was going to be this much of a challenge, I probably wouldn't have moved here. It was something that I wanted to make sure that I could bring the kids into the school system and have that. But so not only my generation, but also thinking ahead. Some people mentioned maybe parking garages isn't the right idea. I'm not sure what is the right idea, but I think we also got to look at that stage and as younger families start to join the community as well.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much. But just before the next question, I'm just kind of seeing some common themes in some of these that I'd love to have an opportunity to, address as well. But, I think that's a great point that there are people that need to take those later trains, whether it's for childcare reasons or for other reasons. We totally understand that. I mean, I think the goal here is to be considerate of that, to also be considerate of the fact that people have different prices that they're willing or able to pay. So we want to set up a parking system that is providing options that suit everyone. Kind of go back to that parking trade-offs diagram that we showed at the beginning. Some people would rather pay a much lower parking rate, and they don't mind parking in a remote lot and taking a shuttle. We need that option. We also need an option of those premium spaces for people who are willing to pay that, and it works well for them. That's fine too. We don't want to eliminate options. We want more options. So there are a variety of ways in which the details of that can shake out. But I just wanted to get that out there because I know that there's hesitancy and concern around, I need this type of program. I need this type of program. We get it. Not everybody is going to park the same way, and that wouldn't even make sense. So we want that flexibility. We want those different options for everyone.
Hi, my name is Robert. I live in North Acton. I have actually two suggestions that I don't think that you have addressed, but it can be part of the solution. I think that this is a problem that requires a lot of actions. First, I would say that pricing is not the only incentive that you need to tackle in order to solve this problem. And the focus of your presentation was clearly the pricing. I think it's part of the equation. We need also to have in our minds that we need to give other incentives, such as carpooling. I mean, people here, I live in North Acton, if I know that someone from North Acton catches the same train that I do, I would be willing to take them. So carpooling could be one of the incentives together with the pricing that could make this a smaller problem. And another suggestion, the second one would be, why not thinking about a more creative solutions such as Zipcar, getting some spaces in the parking lot for Zipcar, for electric car, for a startup to put some solution out there that people can go back and forth. And so the car wouldn't sit idle there for 10 hours. My car stays there for 10 hours without going anywhere. So it's a waste of time and resources. So we need to find other ways, in a creative way, not only fixing the pricing. That's my comment. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you for bringing that up. There are so many different things that we didn't even have a chance to mention this. I think you brought up a couple right now that are excellent. Zipcar. Bill, do you want to add to that?
I just want to mention another idea that I've seen happen is that if you have any big employers that are actually having employees come to South Acton to get to work, what some communities have done, I think this is in Littleton, where the parking facility at the employer's site has plenty of room, and they're already shuttling people from the train station to the employee site. So people are parking at the employee site, at the company, getting the shuttle on the way back, if you will, to the train. So that's something, I don't know if that's even a possibility here, but something to put on the table, basically a reverse commute. So people who are coming out to this area to work, and it could be to another station, I don't know for sure, but it is another sort of demand management strategy that is worth looking into.
Yeah, one other thing I'd add to that is you mentioned carpooling. So the Transportation Management Agency that runs the shuttles, Crosstown Connects, I'm not 100% sure about this, but most TMAs, if you go on their website, they'll have some type of carpool matching program. I am not 100% positive that they have that, but if they don't, they absolutely should, and that's something that we would want to promote as well. We want to make it easy for people to find other people going to the same places that maybe live in your neighborhood, what have you, and make that easier for you, because we saw back in one of the first slides, only 4% of people are carpooling right now in terms of carpooling, driving and parking. So we'd love to see that number rise. That's an excellent idea. Yeah.
Can I make a quick comment? When we added the Maple Street Rail Trail parking lot to the mix, as some of you may remember, because it was a source of frustration for many people, it was carpool-only parking for months. We had 0 takers.
Remember that?
I did not know that, but that's very good to know. Yeah.
I'm Vikram Chhabra, West Acton. Great presentation, some great discussion. As a dad of 2 young kids, I relate to a lot of conversation that went in here. So first of all, I agree with your approach to try to find operational efficiencies before we make a big investment. I think that totally makes sense. My fear, which further is heightened by all that I've heard so far, is that's a temporary solution and not a permanent one. So in my mind, what would be prudent is apply these strategies to mitigate the situation, but in parallel, keep working towards what is the long-term answer. I don't think we can wait on that for very long. So that's just my suggestion to the town and the committee. A lot of discussion around shuttle, and just a thought on that. The traffic situation, the buffer, it's all because of the bottleneck entering into the main lot. So perhaps find better routes for the shuttle. One coming from West Acton maybe drops at the Maple Street lot. So not only adding more shuttles, but optimizing their path is going to help. And the last thing, I'm one of those who come in pretty late, so sometimes 8:30 train, sometimes 10. I don't have an option, because by that time there are no shuttles. Perhaps I might be the few who's coming that late, but if there are no late options, then that defeats the purpose. So hopefully that can be considered. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Missy from Stowe. First of all, I'd like to thank the town of Acton for, taking initiative and paying for this study. I know that sometimes that's hard to get through. One thing, there's a lot of discussion about the shuttle. I would actually encourage you, and I can say this because I don't live in your town, to maybe really study the shuttle. I mean, is there another town within the Commonwealth or nationally where do shuttles work? Because I would not want a garage going up. I don't think that it's good for the communities immediately surrounding the train station. It's not for that kind of neighborhood, and I think it would be very difficult and be very trying on the town. I like the idea of shuttle, and I don't. I have one of the spaces at Gordon's lot. I'm mad that you guys have the lot now, and I'm losing my space, and I know there's many of us that feel that way too. And most of us do it because we don't have the option. Either we have children, or I can't get a spot. I can't get across that train to get the spot in the open lot. And it was great when and there was no other options for us. So I think just long term, I think the shuttle can work, but like this, you've done a really good job with the study on this. Like, let's go out and see if you can find some place to figure out a model for a shuttle that might work. Because I really I personally don't like the idea of the garage. I don't think it would work. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, Stephanie Hartman. I live on Stowe Street, quite close to the train station, actually. And just to echo what we're hearing, I have a child daycare, I need to commute into the city, so does my husband, the timing of everything. I also rent from Gordon Richards. I feel like we have a support group here of people losing their spot. Something else that I live within a mile of the train station, and we discussed pedestrian access, but there's no sidewalk on Stowe Street. And it's not a very safe road because there are a lot of large trucks that go on it, and it's dark and all sorts of things. And I have tried walking at times, and I do, and I've got, all of my reflective gear and flashlights, zooming and things like that. And I didn't know whether, I know there's a sidewalk committee that ranks where sidewalks should go, and I've heard different things from my neighbors about whether that area is even being considered, but it's one thing just to keep in mind, trying to get people out of the parking lot, is to actually have sidewalks, radiating out sort of within a mile of every direction from a train station would be a great thing. And yeah, I guess that's all I wanted to say, just kind of echo what other people were saying. And also the gentleman who made the point that when we purchased a house in Acton 2 years ago, we went through all the, where the commuter rail and the parking, and we talked to people about, how challenging the parking was, and we really, we thought long and hard about it, and then we were lucky enough to get a spot from Gordon, and so, now things are shifting around, and hopefully things will still work out. But I agree with the gentleman that if this becomes sort of this giant thing in our community that people can't park to get into the city, as more people move out of the city because they're being priced out of the city, it will likely be an issue. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Atle Thorensen from Stowe. I belong to that support club. So I thank the town of Acton for having this event here today to allow us to express ourselves. One of the things when we think about the Acton train station is to remember it's a regional transportation hub, right? It's not solely for the residents of Acton, it's for the rest of us as well. And it's important to keep that in mind. But when you think about the study like you're doing here with regard to parking, all of this hinges together, really thinking about when you leave your home and the time it takes for you to get into your office. Most of us are already having a very, very, very significant time with regard to getting to that space. That we spend probably between an hour and a half to 2 hours one way each day. So that's a long portion of our day, and that diminishes the quality of life living out in this area of the woods. So it's important for us, when we talk about parking, that we have access to the parking, so that length of time, that is the service provided by the MPTA, is spent in riding that particular train. That gets to the point that you made with regard to your study with regard to express trains. They're not a luxury item. They're a necessity to actually make the time a little bit shorter. Unfortunately, they're so oversubscribed that it is actually painful to attend those trains. I tend to take the 6:30 train. I have a reserved parking spot, but I take that because I'm probably mainly guaranteed in getting a seat on that train versus the express train in. So if we would like to increase participation of shuttle services, etc. into it, that requires the match from MPTA with regard to shortening the commute in from the South Acton train station. We need additional express trains, more frequent, and we need actually to have them with capacity so that you wouldn't describe them as a cattle cars. But that's really the current, standing for 25 minutes and partially working trains is not an optimal endeavor. Second, when you think about parking and a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, pricing parking out, the first place I'm going to come in to get to a train is to the South Acton train station, irrespective of what you price the lots. How am I going to know in your proposed plan where should I drive to actually find that empty spot? And how early for that train would I need to be able to arrive to actually being able to make it back from that empty parking spot to make my train. Again, it's not luxury to ride, from your house into the Boston area for work. It is actually a very significant portion of the time that we have. So that impacts our quality of life. I'd like to hear a solution for how you would actually, achieve that. And finally, additional parking is required for the future. We need to be realistic about that. And as you described in Ayer, it sounded, it was not the town government in Ayer that's paying or footing the entire bill. But that I thought was a little bit misleading in the context of the conversation. These are federal and state transportation grants that are paying for those type of facilities. And it sounds like the region itself, that is the towns, not including, Acton obviously leading it with having the train station, but maybe with the representatives that we have, we could actually achieve some type of a grant system for a long-term future, building a facility that meets the demand of the future. I've been riding this train for the past 5 years, and the demand on the train has increased enormously as the economy has increased. So, the short train with 500 spots that you have right now, yeah, it's going to last, a few more years. But we need a more permanent, acceptable solution for it, which involves collaboration, too, with MBTA. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the previous person just kind of set me up perfectly. I just thought I'd throw out a different idea, and it may be out of the scope of this, but seems like the express trains in South Acton is causing maybe an inflated demand from people from other towns that can save a half hour, in a commute if instead of going to West Acton train station, they live in West Acton, they come to South Acton and they catch that express train. Does the town have any kind of sway or influence with the MBTA to encourage other towns to also have express trains? Maybe they leave all at the same time from the towns and they all ride on the same line. But just, if people have an express train in West Acton, they're probably not going to come to South Acton for it. They're going to stay in their own town. And that's just going to help cut down on demand.
I don't have a direct answer for you, but one thing I can tell you is that the MBTA and Mass Department of Transportation are about to embark on a system-wide parking management study sometime this summer. It'll be done by next year. And I think they'll be looking at the whole system, not just, a lot of times what happens is you look at one thing and not the other.
Exactly.
And I think there's been this big project that's gone on called the Rail Vision that the T has been doing for looking at the rail system. And parking apparently has come up a lot in that, but that didn't look at parking. So now it's trying to look at parking in context of the whole system. So I know the thinking is there. Whether it will change the schedules, I have no idea. And that's a much bigger question with much bigger impacts.
Okay. Thank you.
If I can, excuse me, if I can comment, if you look at, you can find this online, I think there's 7 proposals in the Rail Vision project or inquiry, and they have different amounts of service at different distances. Some electrify, for example, the interior portions of the routes around Boston and have more frequent service. Some electrify all the way out and have more frequent service. Some of them even propose having every half-hour service all the time. So if you're interested in that, go vote on the DOT website.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, my name's Eric. I commute from Hudson, New Hampshire. Just kidding. I just wanted to echo some of the comments from the minority who travel from outside Acton. I'm a recent commuter. I just started in November using the train system. And what I instantly found, I kind of did an informal version of your study. I drove around to Littleton, West Concord here. I even checked the South Line, Ashland and all along that line, just to see what I could find for parking, because I knew it would probably be an issue. And what I discovered is that unless you got to the train, almost in all of those places, any later than 7:30, you weren't getting a place to park. actually, the best option was at that point West Concord. You could probably get a spot after that time. I don't have kids' schedules or anything to worry about. But what was important to me was my time. What I found when I first started, before I got a monthly train pass, before I found secured parking, and I'm jealous of you Gordon Richards people, because I park at Jones Field. Before I got that parking, I would actually be one of those idling cars. I'd have to get there at 6:40 to guarantee myself a spot, and I didn't take the train until 7:23. So I'd have to sit there for 40 minutes waiting to go get on a train because I didn't want to go down to work and hang out in Boston for 40 minutes. But then when I got that reserved space, that was a huge change. That gave me hours back of my time. Because then I take the 8:02 train in to get down, in time for work. And what I found is I started calculating by the minute how long it took me to do everything. How many minutes from my house, knowing that 117 was going to get crowded at a certain time. How many minutes it is to walk from where I park up to the train, and then, of course, the reverse trip as well. And so I just wanted to make sure, like, the reserve spot was important to me. I understand if things change, I'll have to adapt. But that was an important thing because at least I know I have a spot now when I get there. And I am one of the people, I'm not one of the ones that use it occasionally. I use mine daily. So it's important to know that I have a place to land when I drive up. And yeah, like I said, just for me, getting that time back was huge. So I'm hoping that's also a calculus. For me, if it's cost or time, I would tend to lean more on getting more time back, and I'll pay a little bit more for that privilege. So, and also an additional comment, I never considered the shuttle because they are all on north side. And again, factoring in the time just to get over there from where I come from. If there was an equivalent solution for those of us coming up from the south side of Acton or something like that, or even if, there's something in Hudson or Stowe even that drove up to the station, I would definitely consider that as an alternative to driving, because I would happily not drive my car up there every day and take up room if I had another way to get to the station. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'd love to quickly respond to that. I think, again, I want to reiterate, we're all commuters. I mean, I commute. I don't take the commuter rail. I take the T. I live in town, but I understand how much of our time can be taken up by that. We understand that people have different needs, different schedules, different prices that they're willing to pay. I mean, it's really about the flexibility and the options. Some people need to arrive later, some people need to arrive earlier. We want to make sure that people understand that those options are there, and maybe we expand those options. Like you're saying, maybe you'd be willing to take a shuttle if there was one that was more convenient to you. The existing shuttle, those spaces are only 60% full. So there's room for that to grow, and we want that to grow because that's an excellent option for people.
May I just make a quick comment? I know a number of people from surrounding towns have made comments about, related to shuttles, and Acton would be very eager to work with surrounding towns to establish, transportation from remote parking facilities. So if you approach your own towns and they want to work with us, we'd be very eager to talk to them.
So round two here. I forgot to thank the board to begin with. So thank you very much for actually convening this and actually listening to what people have to say about this, because obviously a lot of towns don't do that. So thank you very much for that. I just wanted to come back to, I guess this gentleman over here spoke very eloquently about that stuff, but that it seems that this is a regional facility, and that as such, you would think that the state and would actually have to kick up some money, as well as the federal government, for this kind of a thing, because this is a huge thing. And if you want, these communities are only going to grow greater. So I think the fact is we can shuffle things around, but I think really short term has to be sort of making all the parking data, but the long term really has to be providing more parking. There's no way around that. There's going to have to be another train station, perhaps in Boxborough. There are definitely going to have to be more parking. There seems to be no way around that. So really, it really seems to boil down to how can we find the money to make that happen? And I think there really has to be a strong focus on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Tom Kelleher, Acton. First, there's been multiple mentions about how come we don't have south side shuttling? We do, it's called the Maynard shuttle, let's not forget that. It goes from the center of Maynard straight to the train station. Not as frequent as the so-called north side Acton-owned shuttles, but they're all actually the same management companies. So anyways, my actual point was bike parking. Okay, we've got exactly 100 spaces, almost 50-50 between covered lockers and outside. As someone said, they fill up in good and mediocre weather, not horrible weather. They fill up pretty much all the time. We need at least another 20 spaces in your design work. Probably on the south side, the Richards property has room for bike lockers that wouldn't in any aspect shrink the car parking at the Richards lot. There's actually a few spots. So I would suggest to the town that they should invest in buying 2 more platforms, if you will, cement platforms that would hold another 2 lockers. Lockers are 10 set, as well as some more outdoor slots. That's it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ken Steele from Stowe. I've been commuting in the South Acton for about 4 years now. I used to get to the commuter lot and discover that if I didn't get there half an hour early, I wasn't getting a spot. It's very frustrating to get there in time for the train and not get on the train. Being a non-Acton resident, I've always felt like a second-class citizen. It's a very frustrating point of view to be limited to only some of the spots that you can park in. I have used the shuttle and had the same problem, that it adds a whole lot of extra time. If you find the central lot full and have to go to the slot, it means you're taking the next train. So you've just had another hour to commute. And it doesn't run late in the evening, so it then cuts down the options of when you can commute. So it's definitely a second-class service. I signed up for the Jones Field lot. I was on it for 3 years on the waiting list. So I've never understood why it was $100. I was told that that was because it needed to match the metered parking, which never made sense. This is definitely something people will pay more for. I would suggest in your lottery system that you should actually allow people to say, this is how much I would pay to get that spot, because some people will pay a lot more to know that they have a spot.
It's definitely demand-based.
I live on the south side, and having to go around to the other side of the lot adds a lot to my commute. And if I can't count on getting the train, then I have to leave much earlier from my house, and I'm willing to pay more for that. I park at Gordon Richards' lot because I was lucky enough to finally get that spot. It's been a godsend. My life is so much better now that I don't have to worry about getting parking at the train station. If I need to take my son to school, I can do that. If I need to take a later train, I can do that. It's wonderful. Why did Acton buy this? Gordon Richard has been providing parking at the train station. Are you going to provide more parking having purchased this?
So the question is why the town bought it. The community has been struggling with ways to increase parking capacity, and a property like this that's located next to the rail station is an ideal place for that to happen, and that's why the town purchased it. So,
but will there be more parking after you buy it than there is now?
the goal is to maximize the parking. I think there's investments that would have to be made that we haven't, the board hasn't made any decisions on how to plan for those investments, but the purpose for obtaining that parcel was for parking. So the parking,
I understand that, but it's being used for parking now. And my understanding from the letter I got from Gordon Richards was he was being denied continuing to sell parking there by the town of Acton.
Because it's privately owned now, and when it's no longer privately owned, then it will be part of the town's inventory.
Would he have been allowed to maintain it as parking as a private citizen?
There's a lot of reasons that regardless of that, the town is purchasing it. He agreed to sell it to the town. Town meeting voted in favor of the acquisition. That's why we're moving forward with it.
Just the people that have been using this facility currently had no say in that. Obviously, he owns it, so he can do what he wants with it. But it's, I don't know.
it was a privately owned property, so he made purchase and sales with the town. I'm sorry he didn't ask.
I wasn't expecting it asked. It just feels like we're losing something that then Acton is acquiring. It's frustrating.
Well, we're acquiring it for the train station, which will
understand.
provide relief on the capacity issues that we're facing in the currently available spaces.
But one of the things I like about this is, I mean, a lot of your presentation is saying, okay, here's how we're going to do things better for people that live in Acton. And I understand there's a lot of people in Acton that park at the train station. But it really, your ultimate goal of we should provide parking to everybody and maybe there's a discount for Acton makes more sense to me than, right now it's exclusively the best parking stations at the central lot are only for Acton residents. So as someone who isn't an Acton resident, it's very frustrating that they pay less and get the best spots and we have no say in it. I can't vote for the people that are making those decisions either, so. Okay, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'd love to just respond very briefly to that. Under this proposed system, I think it actually speaks to a lot of your concerns because most of the spaces under this system would be available to everyone. There would be a discounted rate, perhaps, for Acton residents. But now those spaces are now all regulated in the same way. We're using price to manage things, but everyone has access to everything. Now, in the short term, there is a waiting list for those reserved spaces. We can't make that go away. There's a lot of demand for that. We can do things like slowly overselling, as we discussed, to maximize the use of those spots so that as few people as possible have to stay on that waiting list. But we can't create more spaces overnight. Yes, long term, of course, we want to think about how we can add to the supply, absolutely. Today, I think we're really trying to focus on some of those short-term things. And I hope that some of the things that we presented and that you can look at in more detail here, that those speak to some of the concerns that you have.
Hi, David Hahn, 105 School Street, South Acton. I find it interesting that I'm the first person from South Acton to get up here and say anything. And I want to remind people that South Acton is not just a train station and a parking lot. It's a place, and it's got neighborhoods, and things like a parking deck are just absolutely unacceptable to us. We already bear the brunt of all the traffic coming to that station. I live more than half a mile down School Street from that station. I've lived here for 12 years. When I first moved here, there was never traffic in front of my house. Now it's a regular occurrence, both morning and evening. That's a half-mile backup at the School Street light. So to put, say, 200 more spaces in a parking deck with the same size roads and the same intersections, I think it's a complete madness. And so my first question to you is, did you do the intersection counts? Can you tell me what the ratings are for the intersections right around the train station? Did you guys do that?
So we do have access to those counts. As part of the scope of this study, we have not actually completed intersection analysis for those intersections, but we're aware that it's an issue. That's something we're capable of doing, in the future, that the town is able to do in the future. I think in terms of the discussion of, adding a garage, adding supply, obviously that's one of the places we need to start. What's the traffic impact going to be? What's the impact to the neighborhood going to be? Because there would be an impact. I can't tell you exactly what that would look like right now, but yeah, there would certainly be an impact.
So my follow-up question to that would be, is your firm capable of running computer simulations of, say, more remote lots with a very efficient shuttle service versus putting more spaces, say, in a parking deck right at the station, and compare the time involved for people? Because I used to commute I'm sympathized with the commuters here, because I rode that train a lot all the way to Cambridge, where I used to work. So what's the point of building more spaces in a concentrated area if you spend endless time waiting at the intersections to go park versus parking remotely, taking all those cars off the road, and having a very efficient shuttle service? So I would advocate, if your firm's capable of it, of trying to run some simulations like that so we start dealing with some facts instead of just, well, it'd be a lot better to have more spaces right at the station, because I don't believe it. Lastly, I would say that in terms of shuttle service, there was a city in Brazil where it was actually the mayor was an architect, and he decided they wanted to solve the traffic problems. They had a lot of traffic problems downtown. So they instituted a bus service, and the success of it was overwhelmingly successful because the buses came every 3 minutes. And they just went bam, 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 and everybody abandoned their cars. They all wanted to ride the bus because it was efficient and it was frequent. So I think if you study a shuttle service, I hope you can find somewhere, maybe not even in the United States, about how to really run a service like that, because you can buy a lot of vans and a lot of drivers for $40,000 a space. 20 spaces is $800,000, and you can get a whole fleet of vans and a whole fleet of drivers, and they would show up with great frequency, and I think that would go a long way to solving the problem. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I think those are excellent ideas. Unfortunately, the scope of this study, has not allowed us to take an in-depth look at those things. Our firm is certainly capable of completing shuttle studies, of doing, traffic analysis, evaluating impacts of a potential garage. Those are all things that we do. We're certainly capable of that. This study specifically really focused on parking management. But however, I'd love to have the opportunity to continue, thinking about some of those ideas that you mentioned.
I'll try to be quick since I'm a double dipper. I totally agree with David about shuttles, and I want to point out that 40,000, yes, the 40,000 versus shuttling. And in addition to frequency and reliability is if they were free, if we had free shuttles around town. And I know our transportation coordinator, Doug Halley, tends to agree that the income that we get from the bus isn't that much. Some people are saying, of course, parking is necessary. I just want to question that. I don't believe so. As I've said before, the shuttling might be a better solution. If you build more parking, that's going to fill up too. Maple Street, I just want to put in a plug. I've told the selectmen this very, very many times. Is very important. That late bit of availability after 10 a.m. is so wonderful. When I have a noon meeting, a 2 o'clock meeting or something in Boston, and I go park there, I've rarely seen another car, maybe 3 at most, but it's not enough to cause problems, and it's available after 10 a.m. Somebody mentioned he doesn't have a way, but that's a good thing for people to remember, that is available. The purchase of the land, I think it was a good decision. It has proximity to the center of the station, and I really want to encourage the town to put warmth so people can stop idling, which is an ecological travesty, and bathroom and coffee in that building, and have access to the station from there. In addition, when we put in the station, the MBTA said, just talk to us, have the town talk to us if we want to have a path going to the west end, and that would save people from walking on Maple Street. There are people who live over there who have said they feel like they're taking their life in their hands when they walk along Maple Street. If we just have access to a path there, I think it's a matter of working with the MBTA. And lastly, I want to mention microtransit. Nobody's mentioned this. Microtransit is like Uber and Lyft for public vehicles. The Metropolitan Area Planning Council's local region, the Magic Subregion, recently spent $10,000 and is in the process. They put out a request for information to find out from microtransit companies how they could help our area. We had 6 responses. They have full information. Travis Pollock at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, if anybody wants to talk to him, has all the responses. It would allow us to use technology, use people's phone technology, and route buses or vans to pick up people in their neighborhoods in all of our towns and bring us to the station. And I think it's
the time that we have to be using that technology and investing in it.
Thank you.
Chris Straub from Stowe. I've been taking these trains for about 17 years now, and I've noticed that entire time that this parking problem has existed and will never be solved, in my opinion. I think this is a regional issue. I mean, this is a area of a lot of biotechs and high-techs that are moving in. The amount of people moving out of the cities is increasing. The purchase price of homes within the city limits is exorbitant. You can't afford to support a family on that. And so it will continue spreading to the suburbs. And we will never really get ahead of this unless technology takes us there. I think the microtransit is an idea that I've been looking at myself with apps like Waze, where I can basically pick people up on the way if they self-identify as needing to go there. And that allows me to keep my schedule and hopefully have other people join me on my ride. I did have a number of commuters join me. They'd park in my driveway, and I would drive them to the station. That worked for a number of years until the kids start driving and the driveway fills up with their cars, and you can't do that anymore. So I mean, the point is, I think that this is a constantly evolving and changing situation. I can tell you I've changed my routine more than probably 10 or 12 times over that 17 years that I've been commuting. And if we can find other ways, including, and somebody brought this up earlier, the frustration of getting to the train station and not being able to find a place to park and then having to drive in anyway. If there was some way, and I know some towns have instituted a parking finder app, where instead of just circling block after block after block looking for a place that's open, it will identify a spot that's open or several spots that you can go there. Have you looked into apps like that that could identify open spots, especially for people that aren't taking those peak trains, that, because they probably don't, a lot of people aren't even aware of the fact that those permanent spots, those owned spots, are open after 10 o'clock. If they knew that, then perhaps they would go ahead and park there, and we'd be able to use that more efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a interesting question. We've definitely heard that question before. Yes, that technology certainly exists, the ability to see where spaces are actually available before you actually head out. The town does not currently have the infrastructure in place to make that happen. They do have Passport, so my understanding is that the Passport app itself does not actually have that functionality. You need some additional hardware at these facilities to be able to know where spaces are available, whether it's a gated entrance or what have you. There are a multitude of options. The town does not currently have that, but it's certainly something that's possible, and it's certainly something that down the line could maybe be part of this package of solutions.
Hi, Ed DeLuca again from Stowe. I was a little bit concerned about the comment you made that the statistics were based on relatively brief studies. And so you might think about, how do I put an uncertainty on these statistics if I'm going to be writing policy based on these statistics? Because I've seen, I've lived here since 1993, take the commuter rail a lot. There's a lot of fluctuation, season to season, day to day, relationships, and it's weird. I mean, it's not really predictable. But you show up and it's like, what did everybody do? They like all got saved or something. So it's just an odd thing. So you should try to, maybe there's statistics from the MBTA about fluctuations, but just to get a sense as to, expect that there's going to be changes, and that's going to drive, that's going to constrain your policy, right? Because it's the worst day that you have to be kind of scaling things to, and that may end up with having higher vacancy rates in the distant things. If you want, if you want the capacity to deal with the day in which it's a bad weather and everybody wants to take the train because you're going to die on the roads, then that capacity has to be built in. And I think, yes, the regional solution is really the one that we need to work with, and the towns should work together on, other towns providing parking and the utilization of shuttles from other towns keeping the shuttle trip short so you're not actually circulating through 6 towns to get to Acton would be really helpful, and I think it would provide a solution that people like.
Sir, if I could just ask you a question, would it be reasonable to say that we may have undercounted and that there's okay, so let's just assume that for now that there are days when it is full. I don't think the occupancy level is really the big message that we really wanted to convey tonight. The only message, another key message is the data that we showed about the pricing in the different lots and the way it's operated and the various components of it. So it needs to be looked at it together, and I think there's a lot of things that can be done regardless of whether it's 50% or 99% full that still are applicable. I think that's a key message.
It just sounded like many of your decisions were being driven by
there's no decision. We're just, so I just want you to understand that.
Many of your concepts, you're okay. I understand the comment.
And we would take that into account. I think a lot of the things that we've come up with are things that are not tied to it. Now, obviously, the bigger question about whether to add parking, I want to make it clear that it's just expensive. We're not making a recommendation not to put more parking here. I think the key recommendation is try to fix it as best you can, see where you stand. And I think a lot of people suggested that it's important to not just do one or the other, but I think the first step is the strategies that we've identified. And I think that you would hear that if you brought that to town meeting and you wanted to raise the money to buy it. A lot of people would say, well, what have we done to make it as efficient as possible? So that's important to try and address that during this process.
Thanks, Bill, and thank you for asking that question. I mean, I think, you're certainly right. We did, full counts, but that was only one day. None of these strategies are finalized. These are our recommendations. Okay, so I mean, if you were to make these changes, you would need to continue your utilization counts. When you make a change, you need to understand how that changes the demand. Before I would be overselling any of those reserved spaces, I would want to know, is it really 60% full only on most days? I would want to count that several more times, get a better understanding of what's happening. We only were able to count once. So that's a good point. And, any of these recommendations would need to be tempered by, continued monitoring. Absolutely.
So just a couple of comments in support of regionalization as the approach. So I actually have been taking the train for over 30 years on a regular basis. And it was the same year, maybe within a few months, that the MBTA adopted this express train, which never existed before, and West Concord raised their daily parking rates by nearly 100%. They nearly doubled it. And those two things together totally threw the balance off in terms of the demand for people to park in South Acton versus West Concord. Because West Concord used to be, it would fill, but not super early. You can find a spot there, maybe not every single day. And Acton wasn't anywhere near as bad as now. But those two things together, so you really do have to look at all of those things. I would throw a couple of other just quick thoughts out and then a question. One is West Acton. Once upon a time, there was a stop there. There are a lot of people who could walk to a stop in West Acton. Maybe not every train needs to stop there, but maybe there's just 1, 2 trains in each direction during the commuting hours that stop in West Acton, and it's enough to relieve the pressure of, 20, 30, 40 cars that might otherwise be looking to park in South Acton. Not more than 30, 40 cars, probably more than that. Maybe, I said at least, all right, I don't know how many. But it's worth looking at who's parking in South Acton, those license plates where those cars are registered. And then, I spoke against the dedicated spots, but I would say if you were to keep the dedicated spots, at least have people have to show that they have a monthly pass if they're going to buy them. At least if you're going to have dedicated spots, make it for people who are actually riding the train pretty much every day. And then just one final question, which I don't think anybody has addressed, but you said these are recommendations, but can you tell us please what the process is from here? What happens? You have all of this feedback now. This is not a totally representative group, because of course the people who have those dedicated spots are, I think, overrepresented here. But what do you do after tonight, and how do you get to any actual policy changes?
Sure.
And
So,
when?
Yeah, and I'd love to answer all those questions. So, as Bill
thank
noted, there is going to be an MBTA system-wide parking study. The MBTA does not control the parking facilities at all of these stations. For example, Acton, the town, controls this parking. In other places, it's the opposite situation. The MBTA controls it. But the MBTA wants to make that investment to understand what's going on with parking. So that's obviously, far beyond the scope of what we're doing here tonight, but it's part of the story. I mean, it's related. So that's something to keep in mind. In terms of the process, we're going to finalize these recommendations based on the things we've heard tonight, and put those into a memorandum that I'm assuming will be available to the public, and obviously the town will have that. That will kind of be the end of this part of the study, and the town will take it from that point.
So I can speak to that. So the SATSAC is the South Acton Train Advisory Committee, and they work on issues and make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen regarding situations like this and other situations and policy issues related to the train station. The Board of Selectmen are the entity that would change any regulations or any of the programs that we're talking about today. The board, on a periodic basis, reviews the parking program and the parking rates and makes changes. For example, this past fall, the board initiated the lottery for the new lot on Maple Street. That just happened last year. And as the Gordon Richards property becomes part of the town's inventory, the board will make a decision on exactly how to utilize that. And that's where we'll get into communicating with those of you that use it now, and we'll make sure that you have notice exactly what the plan is. So I guess the next step is we'll get the information from Nelson Nygaard, and we'll use all the input that you provided tonight. Thank you all for coming out here and sharing your very thoughtful ideas and questions. And we'll bring it to the Board of Selectmen to make some decisions related to the parking program in general over the summer and in the near future.
Thank you. And, I'm realizing I didn't answer one of your questions, about the reserved program. You're mentioning, are there people that are buying these spaces and then they're never showing up? I don't completely know that. I don't believe it's tracked in that way right now. One thing that some other cities have done, I know that this happens in Los Angeles, they do have some reserved spaces, but they actually check how often those individuals are showing up. And if you're not showing up often enough, then you're off the list. And someone else gets to take your place. Now, I don't know exactly what that threshold is. I think I heard something like 10 times a month. I don't know. That would have to be, determined, in looking at the patterns that people are actually doing, right? But it's certainly possible to go out there, check the license plates, see how often people are coming, and make some type of agreement where if you don't show up a certain amount, you can't keep the space.
You keep mentioning MBTA during this study. I had raised my hand earlier on, actually. Oh, okay.
Go to the microphone.
Sorry, sorry, go ahead.
No, go to the microphone so they can
Oh, I'm
hear
so
you.
sorry. Just, do we have an idea when they're going to be that study and when it might complete? Because we all know the MBTA, I hate to say it, moves at a snail's pace.
So the study that I'm mentioning is being done by Mass DOT.
I see, okay.
And it's sometime in the summer or fall it'll get started, and it'll be done sometime within a year after that. And it's a system-wide planning study looking to try and address the concerns that people are raising about how things have changed over the last 20 years. It wants to think ahead 20 years. And it's a much bigger set of
But they're starting at the end of the summer, you're saying?
I can't say.
But that's your estimate?
Approximately, yes, because I'm not, it's out there as they're looking for consultants.
But it's not like 10 years from now, but it's actually...
No, in the next, yeah, I could tell you it'd be done in 2021. How's that?
And that's the parking part of the rail vision. Their overall rail vision has already started, and as I mentioned earlier, there are 7 proposals. You can go see them. You can call your state legislators. Some of our state legislators have already taken stands that they like some of the changes or have advocated one particular alternative. So take a look if you're interested.
Hello. I'm a resident of Stowe, and I've been commuting over a decade. First, I was commuting out of the West Acton or West Concord stop, That was a delightful trip. You could miss the train because the train would be parked and you couldn't get to the right side of the train. It was really lovely. I'm also one of the people, we have a spot that we abandon if I get driven to the train, and it's not used. I would love to leverage technology and release that spot so that you guys could earn double dips on paying for that spot on the days I don't use it. I think that's a marvelous idea, but there's no way to do it. No way at all. That's the kind of looking forward to how to solve the parking problem I think we need to do. Find ways to enable the people who use the parking on a regular basis and need the reliability, but could give it back when they needed to. Because I would know the next morning that I don't need it, so if the rule was 5 o'clock the night before, I'll do it by 5 o'clock the night before. It would make the town more money. I mean, there are things that we can look at that aren't about building a parking deck, which I agree would definitely change the nature of the train station. And it's a lovely new train station, thank you, because I used to walk the tracks with everybody else. It's just not functioning for everyone, and I'm sorry, but something needs to change, because I think the lottery idea for parking spots at Jones Field is horrible. I have angina over it. I don't know how I'm going to get to the train. And the idea of not knowing year to year is also not really feasible for people who have long-term careers downtown.
Thank you.
Great, so we're just at the 2-hour mark now. I think we got a lot of great conversations. I believe we'll be sticking around a little bit afterwards if you have some questions about the graphics over there or anything else. And thank you very much for coming. We just, as a procedural matter, just closed the board meeting and the SATSAC meeting.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.
So I want to thank Nelson Nygaard. That was an excellent presentation. Thank you for the work that you put in, and thank you all for coming.